To start off with, we will have a 2-minute introduction about themselves. Ken Millard.
All right, well, thank you very much. My name is Andy Millard. I'm the Democratic nominee for United States House of Representatives in North Carolina's 10th Congressional District. I am a former school teacher, former school principal. I am a business owner, actually a former business owner at this point. If I had lived in Asheville for the last 20 years, I'm sure I would have been involved with SIBO because I've been an owner of my own business and been involved at the Chamber of Commerce down in Polk County. It was a financial planning and investment management firm. This is my first run for political office. The last thing I ran for was student body president of Presbyterian College. I lost the election, but I did get the girl, and I'm still married to her 37 years later. And she's with me here today. That's my wife, Sharon. And I'm running, though, now because I no longer recognize the Congress that I learned about in 9th grade civics class. You know, that problem-solving body that we have citizen legislators that come from different areas and come together to work on the pressing issues of the day. That is no longer what we have anymore, is it? And we need to get back to that. The 10th Congressional District is 7 counties, not quite 7, 6 and a third: Polk County, Polk, Rutherford, Cleveland, Gaston, Lincoln, Catawba, and about a third of Buncombe, which includes this area. And each of those counties has its own distinct issues, its own distinct problems. And I know that for folks in Buncombe County, it is a challenge for you because you've been divided into 2 separate congressional districts. We need to look at what's going on in Congress, and I'm looking forward to having the conversation today about what the issues are that we need to address, and look at how we can collaborate more than fight, which is what we're doing in Congress right now. Thank you.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you to SIBO, and thank you to Highland Brewing for having us in this beautiful new space of theirs. Great that you all come out today. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate the advocacy that SIBO does on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis to advocate for small business here in Buncombe County. It's been an honor to be your congressman, to be your voice in Washington. And over the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity to represent Buncombe County. It's been a privilege to understand the concerns, the challenges of this economic center, the center of the economic universe in western North Carolina here in Buncombe County. Out of that, I focused intently on helping small brewers with regulation, focused intently on helping small brewers with issues of taxation. Those things are vital for Buncombe County. But more broadly than that, we need jobs. We need good economic growth across our nation, which means we need good tax law. We need good regulatory law that recognizes the need for greater economic growth and does so not at the expense of workers, not at the expense of individuals, but for the good of our nation. My work has not just been with those small brewers, but with small business people, helping them get access to lending, to help new startups and those that wanted to grow, the opportunity to access capital, to access funding in new ways. And so I spend most of my time in Congress trying to help small businesses and families with those financial products. And it's been a great opportunity to work through those issues. And in the last 4 years, I'm proud to say that I've achieved 4 bills that have been signed into law that have all been bipartisan and have worked. 3 of the 4 have worked for small businesses in particular and for families in their lending environment. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you. It's an honor to represent you.
Thank you. For our first question, Patrick, we'll start with you if that's all right. Under Obamacare, most business owners and individuals have seen double-digit premium increases this year. What is your plan to fix or change this program?
Well, first of all, I voted against Obamacare, and will continue to vote against the expansion of Obamacare. What we need to do is start over. And I believe, and I've put this in substance and support with other House Republicans, a plan not just to repeal Obamacare. You know that as a Republican I've opposed Obamacare, but to replace it with something better. And that is a system that allows us to buy across state lines, that enables small businesses to pull together to enhance their opportunity to negotiate with big insurers. What we do know out of Obamacare is that 95 out of 100 counties in North Carolina only have one insurance provider in the healthcare exchange. And the average premium increase in North Carolina is one of the highest in the nation going into next year. It's an absolute disaster. We need more opportunity, more competition, more choices, which will help our people have better outcomes.
Thank you. Andy?
Let's face reality. The Affordable Care Act is not going anywhere. There are problems with it. There are good things about it. There are people in this country who are alive today because the Affordable Care Act was put in place. I know a lady in Asheville who got insurance because of the Affordable Care Act. She immediately came down with cancer. She is alive today because of that. On the other hand, I talked with a business owner here in Black Mountain who owns a store. He's locked at 49 employees. He cannot grow beyond that because of the problems that are inherent in the Affordable Care Act. So we got to recognize it's not going any place. There are good things about it. There are challenges with it. The problem in Congress is that there is far too much hyper-partisanship. That's because of the money that goes into Congress, the huge contributions, and that's also because of a lack of transparency. What we need to do is we need to have a Congress now that will work together to solve those problems and fix those holes. They can be done if we're willing to do it together.
I'd like you to hold any applause until the end of the meeting, please. Appreciate it. Question 2. Andy, I'm going to put you up front this time. Why are you a better candidate for this position than your opponent?
This is almost impossible to not mention your opponent in this. My experience in life qualifies me for this position. This is what we elect our Congress people for. We want citizen legislators who have real life experience. I've lived in the 10th Congressional District my entire adult life. As I say, I was a classroom school teacher in a public school. I was a public school principal. I've been the owner of my own business for the last 22 years. I've been involved in my community. I've been a volunteer in my community. And my opponent has never had a job outside of politics. Now, we're in a business setting here. Business owners, we know how to get things done. It's one thing to talk about about small business when you're a public employee your entire career. It's another thing to be able to really understand those issues. I understand those issues. I'm more interested in doing the job than I am in keeping the job. I'll do whatever it takes to solve some of these problems that the current Congress simply will not face.
Patrick.
I'm the son of a small businessman. That's where I learned. That's where I got basically my MBA, if you will, at the kitchen table. And I became a small business person after college. And I've had the opportunity to represent you in Congress and be your voice. You can look at my voting record. You can judge for yourself. I can just summarize it. I've never voted for a tax increase and want fundamental tax reform. I voted against Obamacare, and I support a better way forward for health care. I have opposed the president's approach, this current president's approach to immigration. And I think we should have a better way to put America first when it comes to our issue of immigration, to make sure we do what's in the best interest of our nation for the long term. That means fixing the system. And I also, to that end, have offices here in Buncombe County, have an office here in Buncombe County, and have produced good constituent casework and been responsive to the community.
Thank you. Patrick, I'll start with you on this one. Question 3. Recently, there have been rumors in various governmental meetings that Syrian refugees are going to be assigned to parts of this region of North Carolina. Should this occur and you are in the U.S. House of Representatives, how will you assist local governments to handle this from a fiscal and safety standpoint?
Well, let's begin. The reason why we have a Syrian refugee crisis is we have a flawed American foreign policy stance in the Middle East. And that has led to what is a human disaster and a national security disaster. I also oppose the President's plan to bring 10,000 Syrian refugees because there is no proper way to vet them. The FBI director has actually stated that there is no way to determine that these individuals are not a national security risk. I also led the bipartisan opposition to bringing Syrian refugees to North Carolina and supported the governor's approach to that and led that effort to get that statement from members of the House that we support Governor LaCour's approach to that. And so you can look at my record on this, and I have opposed it, and I think there's a better way, but we have to vet people first to make sure they're not a threat to our national security.
Andy?
Well, let's just clear something up right now. Syrian and other refugees, before they get to this country, are vetted. They go through a very long, very rigorous vetting process. They're not just brought in willy-nilly. And we think back in history, before World War II, we had people who were refugees who wanted to come here. We did not let them come here. And I'm not saying that this is a parallel situation, but look what kind of a situation, humanitarian situation, occurred because of that. So, yes, if they come here, we need to welcome them as we have from all refugees and all immigrants. Many of us here in this room are descendants of refugees, definitely descendants of immigrants. So we need to welcome them. I will work with my colleagues in Congress to provide local resources to make sure that there are the resources available to help the refugees and the new people who come here, but we don't need to just turn them away simply because they're from a dangerous part of the world. The whole world is dangerous, and we are, and our part is as well.
Thank you, Andy. I'm back at you. It appears that most people believe that government does not work. What would you do to fix the underlying structures and systems that appear to be a major cause of the problem?
There are three major causes of the problem: money, lack of transparency, and the resulting hyper-partisanship in Congress. We all know this. This is nothing, no new information for us. Congress does not work because it is hyper-partisan and it's all about the money. Mr. McHenry has raised over $15 million for his campaigns throughout the course of his career. That's a lot of money, over $2.5 million this election cycle alone. So, and we have so many people who are there who blame, and if there's lots of blaming, no solving, people who are more interested in their careers than they are in getting the job done. So to me, it is a fairly simple start to dealing with the problem, and that is, if you want to change Congress, which is where the problem starts, you have to change your congressman. You have to change your congressman.
Patrick, you were mentioned, you want to use 30 seconds to respond to his comment.
Sure, I would actually point to three major pieces of legislation that got done in the last 2 years. One, the first entitlement reform that we've had in over 20 years, achieved in a bipartisan way, that saved Medicare for another generation, ensured that doctors and hospitals didn't get a 30% across-the-board cut. A highway bill that was done in a long-term bipartisan way, and education reform. And so lifting the mandate on Common Core from our local school districts. Now, we've had three major pieces of bipartisan reform, and I'm proud to be a part of that.
Now, for the question. Was that your answer?
Well, let me say, you've got to understand the system to fix the system. I understand the system. I've been working intently to fix the system. I can't control everything that happens in Washington, but I can control my vote and my voice. The four pieces of legislation I've had signed by President Obama were passed in a bipartisan way through the House. My lead co-sponsor were Democrats. 3 of those dealt with small business lending and family lending, and 1 dealt with this failed eugenics program, this awful eugenics program that North Carolina had in the early part of this last century. And so I'm addressing issues in a bipartisan way, and that's what I'm trying to do to drive through this mess that is Washington. And so my accountability is to you, to be your voice and to work for the best outcomes we can, no matter how messy and tough the system is.
Thank you. Patrick, you're up. Our institutions in the U.S. are under cyber attacks and our secrets are being stolen. How do we fight this enemy?
Well, first, we have to have greater coordination between the public sector and the private sector. There is no legal means for one institution that is being attacked to talk to a like-kind institution until we pass legislation to enable that. And for the first time, we actually have that coordination with the public sphere and the private sphere, and that is being done actively every day, minute to minute, 365, since we passed that 3 years ago. That's an important first step. We have to have better laws, and we have to have better policing of those laws, and we have to have better capabilities within our government. That means you have to have the capacity to hire the best and brightest for government service, so they don't go to Silicon Valley. They will come to work in a bunker somewhere outside of Washington, and to make sure that they're on call for these national threats that are trying to erode our economy, our way of life, and our military as well. And so we're working through that. But much of this has been done in a bipartisan way, in a non-controversial way, and ensuring we have public sector and private sector coordination.
Thank you. Andy?
I actually agree with a lot of that, but one of the things that we need to keep in mind, excuse me, in America, we have freedom of speech. We have a right to privacy. And so you have to balance our need for security, national security, with the right of people to have their personal information secret or to keep it to themselves. And as we look toward working with our allies, working between the private sector and the national security apparatus, we need to keep in mind that you can't just reach into somebody's information and take that. On the other hand, we have the smartest technological people here in the world. There is no reason on earth why we cannot reach out to those and work with them, coordinate with our allies, and frankly, not necessarily tell all of us what's going on in our security apparatus, because it's a serious issue. It's one of the many national security issues we need to deal with.
Question 6. Andy? What is your position on the Keystone Pipeline project? Do you feel that it will get ultimate approval?
It will not hit ultimate approval if I have anything to say about it. I'm opposed to the Keystone Pipeline. Global warming is real. We have something to do with it. The debate is over, and we need to be moving toward clean energy. We need to recognize that, and frankly, natural gas is sort of an interim plan between what we've got now and all renewables. And we've got coal ash that we have to deal with from our coal plants. We have similar questions and real concerns about fracturing and fracking. So the same kind of dangers potentially exist with fracking that existed with coal ash. You see what we're dealing with right now. So let's get off of oil. Let's move forward in the 21st century energy sources, and that means solar, wind, renewables. And if we have to do a little bit of natural gas to get us there, well, we just have to do that.
I support the Keystone Pipeline. I think this is about our interest as a continent, and far better for us to buy our oil from Canada than from the Middle East, with all the entanglements of the Middle East. The other absurdity of this debate about the Keystone Pipeline is very basic. Instead of putting that oil in a pipe and sending it south to our refining capacity around the Gulf, What is happening now is they're being put on trains and trucks, which is no better for the environment, I would add. Is actually far worse than building a pipeline. It is less safe as well to truck this stuff through our communities or train it through our communities. So we've added a whole nother set of risk by being short-sighted in the hopes of kowtowing to a loud group that wants to make this an environmental cause when it should be a national security cause. I believe in clean energy. I believe in all these other opportunities as well. But in the meantime, we have to have that capacity to make ourselves strong economically and in terms of our national security.
Question 7, Patrick. What foreign government do you see as the greatest threat to the United States? Why and how should we handle it?
You have to pick one? We're in a dangerous, dangerous world. And so there is a grouping of governments that are a serious national security threat. Russia right now has had the most intensive attacks on the United States in terms of our cyber threats. We know far more about Hillary Clinton's emails because of the cyber attacks coming from Russia, okay? And I admit that as a joke, but thank you for the laugh. But the cyber attacks from Russia are major. Their encroachment in Ukraine, the Russians' aggression in Syria. The fact is they try to step in to fill a power vacuum that we were not willing to fill as the United States and this president wasn't willing to fill in the Middle East. And so you have Russia, you have Iran, you have Saudi Arabia, I'm sorry, not Saudi Arabia. You have Russia, Iran, and China that all pose unique and different threats, as well as North Korea when it comes to cyber threats. But those are the majors around the globe, but Russia is number one right now.
Like, Eddie?
Yeah, this is no contest. It's Russia. Russia, not just from the cyber attacks that they've been doing to our country, but also from the way that they have imposed themselves on Syria, the way they've imposed themselves on the Crimea, and the way that they have basically felt like they can go around and elbow their way around the world and get away with anything they want. Now, the question is, how do we respond to that? And you can't just respond to it by saying, oh, we're just going to be, the tough guy and go in there and do whatever that means. You've got to have a measured approach, and I don't think that means that there's a lack of leadership. I think leadership means you look at things very carefully. You do what you can do behind the scenes on a low-level way. Work with your allies, and we don't always know how that goes, but that's what we need to do. We need to work with our allies and take a measured approach. Russia is the number one threat.
Question 8. Eddie? Sir. Many business owners feel that governmental regulations are too complex and bureaucratic. Do you agree or disagree on what changes can be made to make sensible outcomes?
Has to be a balance in all things. The problem with Congress, as I've said before, money, lack of transparency, and hyper-partisanship. I'm a business person. A lot of us in this room are business owners. And yes, I was regulated as a business owner. I recognize that. And some of it was a little too much. But some of it was needed because I know that in certain transactions, particularly in financial transactions, which is my business, it's an uneven transaction between the consumer and the institution. We need to have enough regulations to make those things balance out a little bit. But at the same time, don't regulate me too much, because this is free enterprise. I need to be able to run my business. I need to be able to pay my employees and expand my business. So I have no problem with looking at the regulations that we have and keeping them as minimal as possible, but we've got to have enough. We can't just eliminate all regulations and expect everything's going to be fine. That's what led to the 2008 financial crisis that almost brought the global economy to its knees.
Patrick?
Regulations cost far too much on American businesses, especially small businesses. If you're a large financial institution, the opportunity for you to add another 3 or 4 lawyers is not that big of a deal. You go to a small business, it would make a huge difference on their outcome to add another person, another 2 people, another 3 people that aren't producing business. There are costs to business. I saw that with my family business. It's not that I oppose all regulation. That's an absurd argument that it's about all or nothing. The question is the weight of these regulations. And that's why I've supported cost-benefit analysis on all regulations coming through our federal government. That's why I support legislation that forces a vote in Congress on major pieces of regulation. It's called the REINS Act. That way you can hold me accountable for the votes I cast every day in Congress about these regulatory matters. And if it's very important, those things will pass. And if they're destructive to the American economy and bad for the worker, they will not pass.
Patrick, question 9. What is your plan to bring down the federal budget deficit and the national debt?
Well, I voted consistently for a balanced budget. Every year I've been in Congress, I'm proud to support conservative reforms to our budget that don't raise taxes, that save our entitlements for the next generation. I have a voting record that's been very clear on this subject matter. I also support in detail budget reforms that would ensure that we never again get into this situation. This president's run up the national debt by $9 trillion, nearly doubling it in his 8 years in office. More debt has been run up in these last 8 years than in the rest of American history. It is absolutely shocking that we can't come together in a bipartisan way to achieve this. My colleagues on the liberal side of the aisle in Washington will say we need to raise more taxes. The fact is the American government took in more tax dollars last year than in the 220 years of our American history. So we have enough income. We've got to fix this on what we're spending and how we're spending.
I agree that it is totally unacceptable, totally ridiculous that the United States Congress cannot come together and do something about reducing the national debt. It's $19 trillion right now, and you can complain about President Obama raising the national debt, but every budget has to be approved by the Congress. How about taking a little personal responsibility for actions that you have done or have not done in Congress? And you're not going to do it just by lowering taxes and lowering expenses. That's been tried before. It doesn't work. A few years ago, we had the Simpson-Bowles Commission. They tried to put together a plan. It was a starting place for conversation. Congress would not even consider talking about it. Now that is a problem. That hyperpartisanship because of money and the lack of transparency. If you have no incentive to lower the deficit through, in my last couple seconds, let me just say this. We're business people. We know that a budget has 2 sides. You cannot do it all one side or all the other. You've got to take a balanced approach, and that's what we've got to do comprehensively. Look at it together and stop this hyperpartisanship.
Patrick, you have 30 seconds to address.
My party hasn't controlled Congress entirely. I'm one voice in Congress, and if you seek to be a member of Congress, you understand you have to get the votes in order to enact those policies. I haven't been victorious on enacting those policies, quite frankly, Andy. And so you can judge my votes and what I have actually focused upon in my time in Congress. I would also add to you this idea that you can just raise taxes is not the right approach. We have the highest corporate income tax rate in the world. We have the highest personal income tax rate in the world. It is about American competitiveness and us having jobs in the United States. And if you think that just raising taxes will have no negative impact on the American economy, I'm not your guy.
Yeah, you take 30 seconds also.
Excuse me, but I never said that just the idea of raising taxes is going to fix things. No, I will tell you this. The one thing that I hear from everybody in the 10th Congressional District is that we need tax fairness. We have people who are paying way more than their fair share, and we have other people who are paying not nearly their fair share, and there are certain things that we can do to improve that. So I'm sorry, but just because you're not in controlling Congress, if you're waiting for the stars to align, President, Senate, House, wait for the stars to align before you get anything done, we're going to be waiting forever. We can't wait for that. We got to do it now.
All right, Andy, you're up again. The Trans-Pacific Partnership has significant potential impact to U.S. businesses. Do you favor or oppose the plan?
I oppose the TPP. The main reason that I oppose it is because it allows foreign corporations to sue American corporations and American governments without going through American courts. Now, the other thing, the purpose of the TPP is to sort of isolate China. You know, it's going to be really hard to isolate China in a global economy. So I would say that the premise of it is flawed, but the main thing is I have a problem with another company coming in and suing our companies or our governments and our government has no way to defend themselves, and we have to end up paying damages or doing something because some other foreign country says we should. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. I'm against TPP.
Patrick?
I'm working with the administration on fixes to the Trans-Pacific Partnership to work through a number of issues that matter to the American economy. But the way I focus on, so I'm still looking through the TPP and working through solutions to what the current agreement is. But to step back, we have to measure these trade agreements on what is best for the American economy and the American worker. Does it net us jobs? Does it net us economic activity and productivity growth? If it does, we should be for those trade agreements. If it does not, we should not be for those trade agreements. One of my first big votes in Congress was on CAFTA, which was the expansion of NAFTA. And I proudly voted against that because it was a wrong deal for Western North Carolina, the wrong deal for my constituents. So when it's a good deal, I'll vote for it. When it's a bad deal, I will oppose it. And that is consistent with the values and the needs of Western North Carolina.
Thank you. Patrick, question 11. What is your plan to address meaningful tax reform?
Well, I've outlined this in detail in a better way, plan that as House Republicans we joined together and to write a very detailed policy statement on what we would do if given the reins of power. Our tax reform plan reduces from 5 rates to 2 rates for personal income tax, reduces the highest income tax rate for corporations down to 20% to make us more competitive around the globe. It's a very detailed plan we put out. You can look at it on my website or better.gop, which details all these other issues. But tax reform is vital for us to have competitiveness around the globe. But simply to do corporate income tax reform isn't enough. Most of our corporations, most of our small businesses, and by the way, small businesses employ most of our folks in Western North Carolina. Small businesses file under that individual tax code. So we need to make sure we have tax reform there so that small businesses can grow and expand and to stay in existence.
Thank you, Andy.
The Better Way plan that he's referring to adds $3 trillion to the debt that we've already got at $19 trillion. 60% of the benefits of the cuts go to the top 1% of earners in this country. They're not paying enough already. We need more tax fairness, not more tax unfairness. And yes, I believe that we need to have comprehensive tax reform, but it needs to be comprehensive tax reform that involves everybody and that makes the system much more fair and at least revenue neutral. Because if you want to eliminate the debt, I happen to be one of those ones who does not think we need to totally eliminate the debt. I think we need to treat the debt as sort of a home equity loan. You borrow a little when you need it, and you make sure that you keep the balance low, you pay the interest, and you get, if you need it, it's there, but you don't tap into it all the time. Out of time.
Thank you. We're to our final question. Andy, you get to ask Patrick one question. And he gets to answer.
All right, I think I mentioned earlier that Patrick has raised over $15 million during his career in campaign contributions, $2.5 million this cycle. And those monies come from, most of them, or the biggest bulk of it, comes from the insurance industry, the banking industry, the securities industry, Wall Street, real estate, lenders, and you are on the Financial Services Committee. You have gotten all this money.
What's the question?
Why do they give you so much? And do you expect your constituents to believe that all that money does not affect your objectivity in Congress?
Well, thank you for the question, Andy. First, the biggest lobbying effort and the biggest financial services bill in American history was the bailout of 2008. I had pressure from every group that you're talking about. And what did I do on that vote? I voted against it. I voted against the bailout not once, but twice. It's the biggest financial service package ever. Every banking lobbyist was working for it, and I opposed it. I've stood up for the values of Western North Carolina, and this idea that you're submitting is absolutely flawed, because my work has been consistent with the needs of Western North Carolina. My focus on the Financial Services Committee has been on helping families and small businesses get access to credit. That has been the whole focus I've had on that committee. And so I'm proud of my records, and I'm proud of what I've done. And the reason why I've raised money is to help elect fellow like-minded conservatives that can get something done for the country and to put us in a better place so we have a stronger, better America.
Thank you. Patrick, you get to ask Andy a question.
Sure. In the debate we had earlier this week, you said that ISIS was on the run. According to every national security expert that I know of, that I've read, that I've met with, that is in fact not the case. And I was wondering if you would please answer where you got that information that ISIS, since we see Christians being beheaded regularly on videos, where did you get the information that ISIS is on the run?
Well, I appreciate you asking that question. It gives me an opportunity to clarify. ISIS, I probably used the wrong wording when I said ISIS is on the run. ISIS is a definite threat, absolutely. But it is also under siege. It is being chased out of territory. It cannot hold territory. It cannot pay its fighters. And yes, it is beheading Christians. It's also beheading Muslims. The number of people who are killed by ISIS is an amazing number, and it's not just Christians. But they are waning. And as I said the other day, it's like whack-a-mole, though. We can't expect that they're just going to disappear completely, because when they're gone, we've got other organizations that are going to rise up and take their place. So it's not a question of whether they're going to survive or not survive. It is a threat. It needs to be dealt with, and we need to realize that they are equal opportunity killers, and we need to fight them.
Thank you. We're now at the closing remarks, 1 minute each, starting with Patrick.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank Wicked Weed. I see Leah in the back. Thank you so much. This is such a beautiful place, and really appreciate the work that you and Brock have put into this, in making it such a jewel for us. And thank you for your leadership for our brewing community. It's an honor to be your congressman. It really is. We may disagree on issues here and there, but the fundamental issue of constituent service, of being engaged in the community, I believe I've done the work that you've asked me to do. I've got good staff that's responsive to constituent casework. And I've also, in Washington, been focused on the priorities for Western North Carolina, to make sure that these trade deals are right for us in Western North Carolina, to make sure that tax reform helps grow and expand our economy, to make sure that health care reform ensures we've got great institutions here with great medical staff, but also us as patients have the opportunity to access those. So focusing on those major issues to help grow our economy and to be accountable to you as my bosses here at home, I think I've honored that pledge, and I will honor that pledge if you give me 2 more years. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. God bless.
Andy?
You're right. Mr. McHenry says that serving in Congress is an honor. It absolutely is an honor. And the way I would honor that would be if I'm not in Washington doing what I need to do and working on votes, I would be here in the district all the time. Patrick has traveled around the country. It just Politico came out with an article last week that indicates he has held 135 different fundraising events. I'm sure almost all of them, if not all of them, have been outside the state. He's taken 34 plane trips this year outside the state. And what is he doing for us during that time? It's not just a question about money. It's not just a question about transparency. It's not just a question about hyper-partisanship. It's a question of how much time is there in a day, in a week, in a year? And if you are gone that much, how can you help the folks here? My focus will be like a laser on the people of the 10th Congressional District, spending as much time as I can because I spent the last year and a half learning about it. I will learn about it more and help you as much as I can as your representative. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for holding this. And thank you, Rod, for moderating. Thank you, Patrick, as well.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for coming. Let's go to work.